Welcome back to Podcasting for Latina CEOs. I am your host and your coach, Heidi de la Cruz. And today, let's get into how do you repurpose all your podcast episodes because you're recording, you have great content, and now you need to repurpose. It's not just uploading on the podcast hosting sites to get it distributed into podcast listening sites. We need people to listen, and literally podcast episodes are literally like the best way to create like multiple pieces of content. And I want to get into other ways that you can repurpose podcast episodes without video clips, because we already know if you record video, you can cut pieces of the video and turn them into short video clips for Instagram, for TikTok, for YouTube shorts, and things like that. But let's talk about different ways that you can do this without the video clips, because we already know that that's available. And also, if you don't want to have video on your podcast, if you want to do audio only, how do we repurpose this wonderful piece of content that you have created? Now, before we get into, I do want to share one testimonial from another client of mine. This is Summer, and she hosts the Wellness Maintenance Required podcast. And I had the absolute pleasure of helping her during her launch process. And then now I edit her podcast episodes. So let's listen into her testimonial.
I can't stress enough about how much Heidi helped me with my podcast editing. I was literally spinning my wheels for weeks, and she came in and streamlined everything in a matter of hours. Beyond that, her podcast was really genuinely one of the most useful resources. If you're starting or growing a new podcast, she covers the full picture from setup, organization, equipment, scaling without overcomplicating things, which is definitely what I needed. She has a very grounded and step-by-step way of teaching as well, which makes the entire process feel a lot more doable. So if you're serious about launching or refining a podcast, she's someone you want in your corner. I know I'm definitely glad that I've had her in mind.
Thank you so much, Summer, for that. I love being able to support and help clients behind the scenes and getting their podcast up and running and editing and just answering any questions that they may have. And funny enough, Summer and I were literally just talking about how to repurpose her podcast episodes earlier this week. And I told her, I was like, oh my gosh, what perfect timing, because this is literally what I'm going to be talking about on my solo episode. So, because she was, trying to get the hang of her podcast schedule and everything. So she's like, okay, now I think I'm ready to go ahead and do more with my podcast content. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today. So, my favorite way to repurpose my podcast episodes is with blog posts. So, I do this with my immigration podcast, and I also do it with this podcast. So, each episode has its own blog post. So you can find all these blog posts for these podcast episodes on coachheidi.com. I'll include the link in the show notes. And you can find my immigration episodes blog post, right, on HeidiDeLaCruz.com. So I turn every single episode into a blog post. And why do I do that? Because I use SEO for discoverability and to be able to rank on Google. And when I look at the keywords that I'm ranking for my website, honestly, like my name is number one, which is really, really cool that like people are Googling who I am and what I do, but also like podcasting. So like how to start a podcast and what are the tools that you need and what are the equipments, like my blog posts are ranking for that, which is amazing to see. And then also know that like all of this effort is worth it, because you publish a blog post, you publish a podcast episode, and it's evergreen. It's there to rank, and it's there for people to find for months and years down the line. So blog posts is literally my favorite way to repurpose my podcast episode, because think about it. The episode outline is already set up similar to a blogging outline. So you have your introduction, and then you have the main points that you want to make. And then you have the summary and the call to action at the end. So if you outline your podcast episodes, you literally use that and write a blog post. But you can also use AI to do this. So you can take your podcast transcripts either from Riverside or from Whisper Transcribe, which I've talked about before. And you can tell ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or Claude is the big one that a lot of people are using now, is from this podcast transcript, can you help me outline a podcast episode? And it will literally outline the introduction, the main points, the conclusion, or call to action. And then you can just fill in with your own words in the middle, right? You definitely don't want to copy paste what AI is giving you. You want to make sure that it's in your own voice. Whisper Transcribe actually creates blog posts for you, which is another reason why I really like Whisper Transcribe. And what I do is I take what it gives me again and then read it over and just make sure that I change it up so it's in my voice. I mean, AI be putting some words and I'm like, first of all, I don't know what this means. And second of all, so I definitely don't say that. I definitely don't use these words. So I definitely restructure the sentences or rewrite it to make sure that it's in my own voice. But blog posts and podcast episodes, I feel like, are so good to flip back and forth. So if you are a blogger and you're thinking about starting a podcast, then you can definitely use your blog post to record podcast episodes, which I actually do that for this show too, because I have been blogging about podcasting for 3 years now. So I have content that honestly, like my very first few episodes, well, actually, even this one is a blog post as well. So I just have been taking my old blog posts and just recording an episode about it, you know? All right. So the next way that you can repurpose your podcast episodes is by creating social media posts. And again, we're not talking about videos. We are talking about like quotes. So what I've been seeing lately is people taking like screenshots or like pictures of like the video aspect of the episode and then like putting quotes of what people said, either the host or the guest, as captions or like over the picture. Now, again, if we're not using video, what you can do is either take your picture, like let's say a photo shoot or like a branding shoot picture, and then just add a quote over it, right? And then just in the captions, lead people to your podcast episode. Or if you have a guest, have the picture of the guest and then a quote that they use. I do that for both of my podcasts. For my immigration one, I like using, usually when my guest is talking about what the American dream means to them, I usually take that quote and I create a graphic. But if there's anything else that they said that's really powerful or like a really nice hook, use those quotes and you can create a graphic for each episode. And then you can also do like carousels. So you can do multiple too. For this podcast, what I like to do is I really just take my show notes because I really try to keep it as simple as possible. And it's literally just a quick summary, like 2 or 3 takeaways and 2 or 3 things that you're going to learn. And I make carousels with that. So it's like, okay, episode 1, this is the title. This is what you're going to learn. These are the takeaways. Here's where you can listen. And that's like a 5-slide carousel right there that I post on Instagram. So that's another way that you can repurpose your podcast episode. Newsletters. Okay. We've talked about how important it is to have an email list for your podcast to market, but also let people know like what the podcast is about, right? What the podcast episode is about. So repurpose your podcast episodes into newsletters. You can definitely write it yourself. You can hire someone out. Actually, I should have mentioned that for the blog post too. Like you can hire, if you have the resources, you can hire a copywriter to write your blog post for you. And then same thing for your newsletter. So they can take your podcast transcript, listen to your podcast, and they can write newsletters for you. And then you link the episode and your email list will get the link and they will listen. Now you can also use AI. So Whisper Transcribe, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, all of them, you can tell them like, hey, take this podcast transcript and write a newsletter for me, a quick summary or whatever, to make sure that people click and listen to the episode. Newsletter is another way that I love repurposing my content. However, I do have a Wednesday podcast mentorship newsletter, right? So I call the people who are in my email list, I call them podcast mentees because I'm the mentor. So I do try to make sure that the what I'm putting in the newsletter and this week, like the week episode, I try to make it that they're different topics because I only publish on this podcast every other Thursday, but I publish in my newsletter every Wednesday. So, for example, this week, so yesterday, because this podcast is now out on a Thursday. So yesterday I published in my newsletter 3 things that you need for a successful podcast. And then today's episode is about repurposing your podcast. So I do try to keep it differently. That's just a strategy that I use because I don't use freebies for my newsletter, which is a whole nother topic and a whole nother episode. But what I'm trying to get at is you can definitely use your podcast topic for your newsletter if the main goal of your newsletter is to get people to listen to your podcast. That's what I'm trying to get at. Me using my email list for a different strategy is something totally different. But yes, you can definitely use your podcast episode for newsletters. Another way is LinkedIn post. So LinkedIn is really big right now with like long form content. You can have a newsletter in there too, and you can write articles in there too. So, your blog post, you can put it on LinkedIn. Whisper Transcript also has an option to create LinkedIn posts for you. But again, you want to make sure that it's in your own voice, that it's in your own voice and that you're not copy and pasting what AI is giving you, word for word. But that is a different way that you can repurpose your podcast episodes. If you are a part of any online membership, so for example, I am a part of Entreprenista and Cocktails and Clothes, Jefas in Training, what other? The UBC, so the Ultimate Branding course. So if you are a part of like online memberships and they give you the option to promote, take advantage and promote your podcast episodes in there, especially if it aligns with the group, right? So for Entreprenista, I love sharing like a little snippet of the podcast episode with my picture and then the link to the podcast. And that gets people to listen to the show. I've had people comment and say how helpful it was and that they really enjoyed listening and then they learned something new. Take advantage of those days and promote your podcast episodes in there. All right. Another way to repurpose your podcast episode is by using threads. I don't know about you, but I am a huge fan of threads. And I talked about this in the episode about social media because threads reminds me of the early days of Twitter. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I really am a writer at heart. So all of these different ways is like ways to like write and repurpose. But threads is a written first platform. And so you thrive with writing threads on there. So you can do like a little teaser, a quote, and have people go to your podcast episode. Now, I will say, don't put the link to your episode in your first thread post because Meta likes to keep people on their platforms. And on threads, I've noticed that the posts with pictures or with links or with videos, they don't perform well, meaning that threads doesn't push it out to people. So the workaround around that is write one post on threads and then say like see below or something, post that thread and then attach the link to the second post. So that's a little workaround of how to get people to see your post about your podcast episode and then link the episode. Also, what's really, really good on threads is when you engage with other people. So let me use myself for an example. I talk about podcasting, right? And this show is all about podcasting. So I share podcasting tips and I engage with other people on threads who are asking podcasting questions. So I see a lot of times like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Where do I start? And so I engage and it's like, hey, I have a whole podcast episode on how to start a podcast, episode 11. And I link the episode in their response. Or if the people are asking about equipment, I answer their question and then I link the episode for my equipment. Not only do they see the response, other people see the response as well. So other people will engage and see my episodes and then go and listen to the episode. It has happened multiple times, but that's another good way to repurpose your podcast episode, but also promote your podcast on Threads. It's not just about you posting, but also just engaging in conversation so other people can see your interactions with your responses and then show you as the thought leader in your niche and in your industry. Now, I am seeing a lot of hot takes lately. I actually just posted about how you don't need video for your podcast, and a lot of people agreed. Actually, a lot of podcasters said they don't want to include video, that they want to do audio only. They don't want to, like, get their hair done or makeup done, females, right? And particularly, they just want to record. And a lot of people were saying that they just listen to podcasts, but now we're seeing this big push on doing video. So yes, I didn't put that it was a hot take, but it really is my hot take. Like, you don't need video to start your podcast. The majority of the people agreed. I did have one or two people was like, why not do both? Or and there was another one that was like, well, I respectfully disagree. And which is great. Like, yes, YouTube is out there, but okay, I'm sorry. That is a whole nother topic for a whole nother day of why you don't need video for podcasting. All right. So yes, engage on Threads, repurpose on there. And if you don't know what Threads is, it is attached to your Instagram account. So you do need to have an Instagram account to have a Threads account. So going back to the blog post, one way that I like to promote my blog posts is using Missing Letter, and I will include that link in the show notes. Missing Letter pulls from your website every single time you publish a new blog post. It pulls from your website and it creates 12 months worth of content for you, and it promotes it on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on your Google business profile. I think those are the three. It does it for you automatically for 12 months, so for a whole year. So each blog post that I publish, I have Missing Letter do a month worth of campaigns for me, and it does the heavy lifting for me. So my blog posts are constantly being promoted on those three platforms. I also do, you can do this if you want, you don't have to. But what I like to do is also repurpose these podcast episodes and the blog post, right, for each episode. I like to repurpose it on Medium. Medium is a freelance writing platform, and I like to repurpose it on there because Medium has a high DA score and also SEO discoverability, right? So a lot of times when people are Googling or searching about podcasting, my website comes up or my article on Medium comes up. And that is another way that I am expanding my online footprint. But again, you don't have to do this. That's, extra work that's not really necessary. I just do it because as a writer for an SEO optimization, I just, expand my online footprint that way. All right. So obviously the last one is video clips. If you do record video, you can definitely get, snippets of the podcast, like 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 90 seconds, and you can repurpose those on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram. And Riverside, if you record on Riverside, like I am doing right now, they actually create magic clips for you. So like they take the best quotes and things like that that you said or that your guest said if you record virtually, and they create magic clips for you, and then you can just repurpose those. There's another good AI, Optimus Clips, I think is how it's pronounced. I know several people who use that. They really, really like it. I use Riverside currently right now because it's free and I pay for some other stuff. But Optimus Clips is another good one, AI that does video clips for you. And yeah, but if you don't want to do video, there's plenty of other ways that you can promote and repurpose your podcast episodes that doesn't include video. All right. Well, thank you again so much for being here for another week. If you want to join the email list and get more behind the scenes content, more podcasting tips every Wednesday, you can sign up for my podcast mentorship newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Um, I did also want to ask if anyone is willing to do a free podcast coaching call on the show. So I am looking for two people who are willing to get free coaching from me live. We'll have it recorded and then I will use that for the show. If you are interested, please send me a text in the text feature on Buzzsprout. You will see it in the show notes and then we can talk about what specific podcast question you have that we can record and use on the show. And lastly, if you really enjoy listening to these podcasting tips and these strategies, please leave a rating or a review. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a rating on Spotify. And also just let me know if you have any questions that you would like for me to answer on the show. Thank you once again for being here. Until next time, con mucho amor, Coach Heidi.